What is your official job title?
I am a principal and design director at an architecture company that I co-own.
What do you guys primarily focus on at your company as far as architecture?
We specialize in what we call high-performance architecture, really sustainable, energy-efficient projects. We do a lot of residential projects. We do homes for people, new constructions. We help people remodel their home. And we do smaller commercial projects like building out retail spaces, office spaces, in that kind of a vein.
Do you need like a minimum level of education?
Yeah. So to be a licensed architect, in most cases, you need typically a master's degree in architecture. You need a minimum of 3 years of documented experience in the profession. And then you have to take 6 exams that kind of test your competency across like different kind of topics in the profession to finally become an architect. So for a lot of people, it takes, 10 years or more to get to that point.
Wow, so it seems like the licensing thing is big as far as being an architect. Even if you work for a company, like they want you to get licensed.
Yeah, that's generally true. A lot of people have very successful careers without going through all of the steps to become licensed. And that's definitely a possibility. But the best way, particularly to kind of take on more responsibility in the profession, is to go through all those steps and become a licensed architect.
And now, as far as the master's degree, I mean, it seems like when I was like looking through resumes and stuff like that, it seems like, the vast majority of architects do have a master's. Is that because it kind of gets you one step closer to kind of getting licensed, like without having to find a job first? Or, I mean, is there any particular reason why everybody gets their master's?
Yeah, you honestly, to really be kind of taken seriously in the profession, you need a master's degree. So when I finished my undergraduate degree, I had already worked in a profession for while I was in undergrad, but then I took a break and I worked in a profession for a few years before going back to grad school. And to really be kind of respected in the profession, really, and to be able to carve out your own path in the profession, getting a master's degree is definitely the best route. And so a lot of folks, even if they take some time off in between undergrad and grad school, will end up going back and getting a master's degree. And then that opens up a lot more career opportunities.
What is your overall job description? Like, kind of what do you do in a nutshell?
As a business owner, there's kind of one whole side of that part of it. But, generally as an architect, I'm responsible for meeting with clients at the beginning of a project, whether it's a homeowner or a business owner, and starting to understand their needs, whether they're building a new structure, how that structure can serve them and their needs, or whether it's a remodel, and kind of learning about them, about their lifestyle, what works for them and what doesn't. So we call that kind of step in the process programming, where we're kind of developing the program of the design. And then from there, we can move into conceptual design, schematic design, where we're figuring out how these spaces are going to fit together, how the structure is going to work, how we kind of fit all of the parts into the structure, whether it's a piece of land or whether it's an existing structure. So we kind of start with an initial design, which gives clients a pretty good idea of how this design, this space is going to meet their needs. From there, we just get more and more detailed until we're drawing what we call the construction documents, where we're actually drawing kind of layer by layer the materials that will go into building a wall or building a floor system or building a roof. And we're accounting for everything from finished materials like tiles and wood finishes and any other kind of surface, sometimes furniture and fixtures, the insulation. You have to have an understanding of how the building is actually going to perform, how it's going to keep out moisture, how it's going to keep out heat or keep in heat. So we're considering the electrical systems, the lighting, the plumbing systems, the mechanical, the heating and cooling systems, all of that. And, it starts at the big picture where you're talking about project goals and the kinds of spaces that need to fit into the structure. And then you move all the way down to the details of specific materials.
Wow, it sounds like you guys have a really broad range of deliverables. It sounds like you almost kind of overlap with like maybe what a civil engineer or a structural engineer would do, and then you also overlap with what an interior decorator would do or something, and it seems like you kind of just have a huge area of responsibility as far as there's a lot you have to do. I mean, is that accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. As an architect, we're kind of the generalist in that we work with those people that you're mentioning. We work with interior designers and we work with engineers and other consultants to, move a project forward. And the more complex the project is, the more stakeholders are going to be involved, the more consultants and teams are going to be involved. But as an architect, we're responsible for coordinating all of those things and integrating them into design. So we will take an interior designer's work, we'll take the structural engineer's work, sometimes on a bigger project, a civil engineer or mechanical engineer, and integrate all of these things into our drawings, our documents. And the architect is ultimately responsible for coordinating everything that will ultimately be handed off to a contractor to build.
Now, as far as like your work environment goes, do you have like your own office? What kind of work environment are you in typically?
Because a lot of the work we're doing, we're either on a project site or we are working on a computer or, drawing by hand to generate design ideas. We have a home office, so I work from home mostly when I'm not on a job site.
Being on a job site versus being in the office, what would you say that split is time-wise?
Really depends. Like right now, more of our projects are in the design phases as opposed to construction phase. So when we have projects that are earlier in the design phase, we're spending a lot more time talking with clients and working on design documents and less time on a job site. You would have asked me that a couple months ago, towards the end of last year, we were spending at least 3 days a week on a job site. So we were definitely spending more time on a job site because we had several projects under construction. So it fluctuates.
So you're the type of architect that builds plans and then is actively involved with the construction as well. And the reason why I ask this is from my small understanding, don't some architects just literally create the plans, make them, and then give them to the client or sell them, and then they're not really involved anymore?
That can happen, but I would say it's actually more typical for architects to remain involved on a kind of administrative level through construction and to oversee construction kind of on behalf of the client. So we act as the client's advocate. We'll go to the job site a set amount of times. Maybe it's once a week, maybe it's every other week. It depends on the project, but we'll go to the job site, take photos, look around, and make sure that everything's being built according to the drawings and according to the design intent. And if it's not, we have to have a conversation with the client and inform them what's going on, and they can decide to take action or not to bring things back into the kind of original intent. So that's really pretty typical, is that you're involved, provide an extra set of eyes, kind of a professional lens, I guess, to be able to see the project taking place, make sure everything's happening according to plan, and also to answer questions from the general contractor. Sometimes they have questions and there's information that they can't find in a drawing set, or there's unexpected things that they encounter on a job site, like when they start digging in the ground, and we have to be available to answer questions. So it really helps to be in the loop about what's happening on the job site throughout the process so that we can kind of work with both the owner and the general contractor to keep the project moving forward.
What did you actually major in when you went to college?
My first degree was a Bachelor of Science in Architecture, and that's pretty typical, although actually a lot of folks will end up going to undergrad for something totally different, like English or biology or something like that, and then go to grad school for architecture. That's feasible too. But I went to undergrad for architecture, and then my master's degree was a master's in architecture. What's important really is the master's in architecture if you're looking to pursue licensure.
Is that more challenging, though, to get a bachelor's in something that's not really related to architecture and then just do a master's? I mean, would that hurt you in getting licensing? Because, would that be, less experience?
It depends. It can actually be a really huge asset because architecture is a very creative profession. The people that go to undergrad for, let's say, humanities majors, a lot of times they have a really, really strong kind of creative background, and they can apply that lens to graduate school in architecture. So the people who do that, they have a broader base to kind of pull from as far as, inspiration that you can kind of apply to design projects. And that can be a huge asset. On the other hand, they're typically a little further behind on the technical skills, the modeling and drafting software. Sometimes the people who don't have a few extra years of experience can kind of struggle, but those skills, the kind of technical skills, really are pretty easy to pick up. So it just depends. I've seen people really thrive in grad school after going to undergrad for, a humanities major, a science major, or something completely unrelated to architecture.
If you had to do your bachelor's over again, would you still have chosen architecture?
Yeah, I would have. And Mostly that has to do with the fact that my undergrad, the University of Cincinnati, they just have this really great internship program where I was able to get a lot of good professional experience working in real firms while I was in undergrad. And that was the biggest asset, I would say, to having an undergrad in architecture. By the time I got out of undergrad, I had enough working experience to go and be competitive at applying for jobs. And, I kind of knew my way around the profession to a degree already. And that was definitely a huge advantage.
When you were doing your bachelor's, your junior and senior level courses, at that point were you starting to design stuff in the different programs and everything?
Yeah, from my first year, we were doing a lot of building by hand, building models, and these sort of creative exercises early on in architecture school, and they're meant to kind of get you thinking like a designer. But definitely by the second year, we were using some of the software that professionals are using in the industry. And in fact, I was pretty familiar with a lot of the digital tools that architects use by my second or third year, and then was also working internships and jobs through undergrad where I could apply those and learn even more.
Were you always interested in architecture, or did you ever have another interest?
I think from a very young age, I was interested in construction. I was interested in building things. I took up furniture making pretty young as a teenager. So I knew I was interested in some sort of craft, some means of kind of working with my hands. And, architecture, it's sort of the professional, the creative side of the construction industry. So eventually by high school, I kind of settled on architecture as a career path because it seemed kind of like the best of both worlds. I would still be kind of involved in the creation of, the making of structures of things, but I would get to apply this kind of creative lens to it as well. So the kind of balance between artistic and the technical problem-solving side of it, that really appealed to me, about architecture.
Did you ever consider doing another job or no?
Yeah, I considered, I worked for a little while as a cabinet maker doing carpentry, and that's always been work that I've enjoyed. And, I have a general contractor's license as well. So we do what's called design build, where we're sometimes an architect and a general contractor. And that's really kind of allowed us to bounce back and forth between designing and making. And I think throughout the last, 10 years or so, I've gone back and forth quite a few times as far as doing more designing and digital and drafting kinds of things and doing more hands-on construction-related things. So I suppose they're both related, but I definitely considered taking a different path at least.
What made you go the path of the architect instead of just doing general contracting?
Ultimately, the architecture profession, it takes a long time to work your way up to becoming a licensed architect, but it also opens up the most possibilities. I know architects, or at least designers with a background in architecture, who have gone on to do things like design sets for theaters and movies, to do kind of exhibition design, to work with other artists. Some of them become writers or videographers. The skill sets that you learn in architecture school and in the profession, you can apply to so many other things. The design skills are so valuable that you can apply them across such a broad range of creative problems, and those skills are really in demand. So ultimately, I felt like going down this path, pursuing a career in architecture, would open up the most possibilities.
Now, as far as the specific college that you went to for bachelor's and master's, was there any particular reason why you went to those schools?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Cincinnati for undergrad, which is a really incredible competitive design school, not just for architecture, but for a range of design professions. And I went there because of the faculty, the resources, and just the caliber of the program. There's definitely a range of design programs, architecture programs out there, and some of them are really competitive, and you're going to get different kinds of education. Some of them trend more towards the technical skills. Some of them trend more towards conceptual design problems and artistic kind of skills. And I think the University of Cincinnati, where I went to undergrad, was a good mix of both. They also had a really good co-op program where they have great relationships with employers across the country and even internationally. And there's an opportunity to go work internships kind of mixed in. You'll be in school for a semester, and then your next semester you'll go work an internship and then come back to school. And all your classmates will go do the same. So everyone's getting kind of college classroom education, this studio education, but you're also getting the real world education by going out and working in a firm. It was a huge asset, I would say, to that program. And then the University of Utah, they have a design build program that's really incredible, where you go through the process of designing and building an actual structure over the course of 2 semesters. And most of the projects they're kind of in southern Utah, and the program has a bunch of partnerships with different kind of nonprofit and other organizations that they work with to design and build pretty impactful buildings, I would say.
When you were looking at it, the master's program, it didn't bother you that it was like far away?
No, that's what I was looking for. I was looking to leave the flatlands of Ohio and go hang out in the mountains for a while. And I would say that's kind of one thing about being in the architecture profession is so many of my colleagues, they're people that I went to school with, are now all over the country, and some of them have worked internationally. And it really opens up a lot of opportunities to travel. And I think a lot of the people that tend to go into the architecture profession, they're really open to traveling and taking advantage of the opportunities.